Well, hi everybody, welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. 2 weeks ago, I spoke about how not only the Greek, but also the Spanish and Italian and French attitudes about coming to grips with their entitlement mentality was driving not only the euro, but even the entire European Union into the sea. And in my darker moments, I fear that it will only be the sight of Rome in flames, of the Acropolis crumbling, of fire consuming the paintings in the Louvre in Paris coming into American homes in HD that might shock us here in America enough to finally face the music and realize that the party's over, that we've spent all the money there is, and all the money we can tax, and all the money that we can borrow, and all of the money that our children will make, and their children too. We've spent it all. It's gone. All the money in the world. Now, Europe, somewhat further along in this horrible debt nightmare, at least politically, because no one owes the kind of money that we owe here in America, decided in a fit of denial, and denial is rank cowardice, it always is, to simply vote the problem away and replace discipline and reform with politicians promising ever more from the long, empty goodie bag. They chickened out. Wisconsin was Europe writ small, well-organized, often violent groups of people who had the audacity to say things like, "This is what democracy looks like," as they had their temper tantrum outbursts at the result of real democracy, and who used threats, sit-ins, and the worst forms of intimidation to make sure that democracy could not function. You know, both sides went all in on this, the public sector unions, the National Democratic Party, every progressive pundit and news source, everything. And against them stood a ridiculed, slandered, leaderless group of dedicated people who spent a year in peaceful, respectful, legal rallies, just long enough to meet new friends and exchange email addresses. People who had never been to a political rally in their lives. People who were not protesting to impress each other with how romantic they looked, but rather to learn through painful trial and error how to affect political outcomes to undo the damage that this catastrophic turn to the left has done to this country. These quiet, decent people, who I've had the honor to speak to and listen to in several large rallies and in at least 30 or 40 smaller meetings, the Tea Party movement, got out the vote in 2010 and walloped, and I mean shellacked, the progressive Trojan horse that had been sold to the American people in the guise of moderation and centrism. And then, in Wisconsin, these quiet people got out the vote and shellacked them again. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker gets open death threats because he opposes public sector unions. He's right to oppose them. So let me just say this about unions in general and public sector unions in particular. Now, as a conservative, I remain committed to the idea of individual liberty and personal responsibility. That means I wholeheartedly and without any reservations whatsoever support the right of free individuals to band together and collectively bargain with private companies for wages and benefits they might not be able to achieve on their own. But because I believe free citizens should have a right to join a union, I also believe free citizens should have a right not to join a union. They should have a right to work without joining a union. Now, union leaders claim that being in a union improves the lot of its members. If that's the case, then writing their monthly union dues check should be the high point of a member's month. But when America has devolved to the point that we even have such an expression as a right-to-work state, meaning a place where you're not required to be in a union, well, we've come a long way from the ability to willingly form unions. When union dues are taken by force of law from workers' paychecks, that doesn't sound like a benefit to me. It sounds like a tax on the unwilling. And sure enough, when those laws and automatic deductions are repealed, union dues and union membership rates don't just fall, they plummet. And public sector unions are different. They should not be legal, and here's why. Police, firemen, sanitation workers all provide essential services for which there is no competition. That job security is the countervailing advantage for their lack of unionization. If GM workers go on strike, I can always buy a Honda. But if policemen strike or firemen, that's not negotiation, but rather blackmail. I don't get to call a different fire department while my house burns down or wait 7 weeks until a contract is renegotiated if someone's trying to come through my window with a gun. But most importantly, in private sector unions, there's some balance and some limits. The union negotiates against management, and they are opposed to one another. A compromise is met in public sector unions, though. Union money and organization gets pro-union politicians elected who then hand out public money in exchange for more votes. And when I say limits, I mean simply this. In a private union, the union can place so many demands on a company that the company's forced to go out of business. Now, when that happens, unions must back down a little or everyone's out of work. But in public sector unions, we've seen them take more and more benefits and entitlements, and when there's simply no more money to pay them, the government doesn't get to go out of business. It just does what companies cannot do, either print money or go ever deeper into debt. And that's where we are, or were. You know, this is a long way from being over, but the courage of Scott Walker, and not just political courage either, physical courage in the face of credible death threats from loving, caring progressives in the endless history of pro-union violence, combined with the quiet, hard work of Tea Party patriots may mean that we will not have to drive off the same cliff as Greece and France and Italy and Spain and eventually everyone else too. We may, in fact, be different after all here in America. Wouldn't that be exceptional? America is waking up to the obvious. Socialism doesn't work, if for no other reason than, as Margaret Thatcher once said, sooner or later you run out of other people's money. Now that is a sign of real hope and change.